any of these other occasions, I think it's fair to say that you've picked up on and been able to see that a lot of these authors were a little self-absorbed in some of these pieces we've been looking at. So, that one shouldn't be too much of a surprise to you. Now, as far as though kind of linking to the two poems I had you guys read yesterday, do they relate to self and autobiography? Well, in one case, yes, and in the other case, let's hope not. So let's really quickly just review those poems that you looked at yesterday, and maybe you noticed that the two poems, the one out of Common Lit and then the one I just gave you the link to, that the authors had the same last name. Well, there's a reason for that. They were married. Now, unlike, as I had mentioned to you on more than one occasion that, Mary Shelley was married to another author, and, well, their marriage had some scandal involved in it. Sonnet 43, written by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the one from Common Lit that you looked at, and then My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, just the one that I gave you the link to. That marriage was a very happy one, a very model type relationship. I mean, they were just so head over heels in love with each other. Like there's been a movie made just about, well, more than one movie, made just about like how much these two just totally loved each other. And a very beautiful marriage, all right, which we saw in Sonnet 43. In Sonnet 43, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. And then, goes through and enumerates all of these different feelings. And, I can love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. I love thee freely. I love thee purely. I love thee with passion. I mean, that's really what their relationship was like. They were incredibly happy, this married couple. Well, then, though, we have My Last Duchess. Now, is it focused on self? It is focused on the self of the speaker. However, the speaker in the poem is definitely not Robert Browning, which is good, since the guy in the poem had his wife put to death. So it's probably best that that is not how he really felt, especially since it was a little sketchy whether she did anything that was worth being put to death anyway. So it is focused on the self of the speaker, and it's done in the form of a dramatic monologue. And that's the type of poetry that Robert Browning liked to write. He wrote a lot of dramatic monologues. So these first-person poetic pieces of storytelling, like that was really what he enjoyed. That was kind of his favorite form to write. But yeah, this character that he created for this particular story, sure, there's some feel of autobiography in it. There's some feel of self in it. But luckily, yeah, it is not actually Robert Browning that you are experiencing here. Instead, it's some, incredibly jealous guy. So let's take a look at that poem really quickly today, and then we'll use that to morph into another piece to take a look at. So this is what I gave you the link to yesterday, but I'll try to blow it up here. So we start out and we're in kind of like an art gallery in a wealthy man's house. He's a duke because the last woman he was married to was a duchess. So he has some royalty about him. And there's a painting of his last wife. And it's a very good painting. But at what cost was it a very good painting? Because the person that he hired to paint it is at least one of the people that he's concerned she had been unfaithful with. And just to make it even more questionable, he said this person's name is Fra Pandolf, who was not a real person, by the way, in the time, okay? But he's a priest. So a priest painter has been hired to come in and paint a picture of this guy's wife, and the painting is so lively, and this painter has been able to capture a look on her face that seems to be more than just artistry, and he becomes convinced that, yeah, his wife has had this fling with this guy who's a priest. Now, painters back then, I mean, I would say it's probably true today too, but if you're hired to paint somebody's portrait, it's not like at the fair when you hire somebody to do your caricature and you know that they're going to, like, make your worst characteristics stand out even more, because that's what you do in a caricature. That's part of the reason why, I mean, painters back then especially if you were painting for the royal family or somebody within royalty, you were supposed to make that person look a whole lot better than they really did. It's part of the reason we really don't know what some of these people from the time period looked like, even though there are paintings of them. Because you definitely did not want to be realistic if the person you were painting was homely. Because, especially if they were in the royal family, they could chop your head off or something. So, this painter, is it fair to say that the speaker in the poem probably hired a priest in the first place because he thought, well, my wife won't flirt with this guy? Yeah. But evidently he's become convinced that she did flirt with him. And there was something that went on there. And so, yeah, it is, it's a painting that he hired this guy to make right in the way that he made it, but it's a little too good. So it causes him to feel jealousy. And now he keeps the painting covered with a curtain, but he's decided he's going to show it to this person so that he can kind of explain why his last duchess is in fact his last duchess instead of his current duchess. Because, yeah, says that there's a blush on her face that he didn't like seeing, except if he's the one who caused it. But he also says that other people have caused it too. Somebody gives her some cherries and she blushes. Somebody gives her a kind word and she blushes. Somebody treats her with decency and she blushes. I mean, she may just be kind of a shy person, but no, he's convinced that she's having these affairs with all of these people. So, we get down to the line that says, I gave commands, and then all smiles stopped together. So he has commanded that she be put to death. But there's still this painting. At this point, he's now looking for another woman to marry. And the person that he's speaking to in this poem is like a servant, but a little higher, more like a butler, okay, for a man who's trying to convince this guy that his daughter should be his next wife. So this Duke is just explaining, basically, hey, if your boss wants me to marry his daughter, just be aware that I had my last wife put to death. So I want you to know what you're getting into here. Yeah, I mean, there would be money, there would be power, there would be prestige being married to me, but if you want your daughter to marry me, be aware that I put my last wife to death because I didn't trust her. And then it's just like, okay, by the way, let's go on down the hall and see then some more of my art. And that's where this poem ends. So, yes, there's definitely a sense of autobiography for this made-up person. There's definitely a sense of self and self-indulgence for this made-up speaker. But yeah, this isn't Browning. Browning was madly in love with his wife. This is just some weird character that he made up. And maybe this is why Browning was madly in love with his wife, because he didn't feel like he had anything like this to worry about in their relationship, because they were head over heels with each other. So yeah, this is not what Browning is like. And we see what their relationship really was like. Because again, this is really the speaker in Sonnet 43 is really Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Like, this is exactly the way she felt about Robert Browning. So, wanted to kind of use these as a jumping off point in terms of this idea of self and autobiography, because definitely in Sonnet 43, both of those qualities are included. Okay. And in My Last Duchess, both of those are included, but they're included for a fictional character as opposed to the real Robert Browning. He just really made some interesting fictional creations. All right. So we're going to pursue then this concept of self and autobiography today, and take a look at an author who definitely uses a lot of that ahead and grab a textbook and go to 508. Now, this is a poem we already looked at. You guys looked at it in Common Lit, and you didn't do as well on the questions for it as I had thought you would, especially after seeing how well you did with the questions with Asmodeus in Common Lit, which really is a harder poem to get a grasp on. So I kind of wanted to come back to I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud just really briefly today, but it also works nicely with this concept of self and autobiography. Now there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on in I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. We have wonderful figurative language in it. This is, you were focusing on personification in this. You know, just the fact that it's saying a cloud could be lonely is personification. Talking about the daffodils that are dancing, personification. Tossing their heads, personification. But then this concept of self and autobiography in I Wandered as Lonely as a Cloud. I mean, right off the bat, self. I wandered lonely as a cloud. So right off the bat, that first person narrator puts a focus on self, puts a focus on autobiography, seeing things through this speaker's eyes, relating to the daffodils. Okay. So even though that wasn't the focus of this poem, when I had you guys look at it, that wasn't the characteristic that was being focused on, for a poem as short as I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud is, it's got like everything in it. Like all 10 of these characteristics are pretty much in this poem. Like Wordsworth, if you had to pick one poet that is the embodiment of the Romantic era, Wordsworth would be a pretty good choice. Okay. So yeah, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud has that emphasis on self and autobiography. You know, as it's in the last stanza when it's talking about when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood. And then he remembers back to this experience that he had looking at the daffodils. Okay. So you've got that. You've got that glorification of nature. You've got that awareness and acceptance of emotions. I mean, you know, you've got those 10 characteristics all jam-packed into 24 lines. So Wordsworth is a really, really, really good author to take a look at. I mean, we've looked at several authors, but Wordsworth is a really good one to take a look at when we are getting to the end of this Romantic era, because he just was doing it so well, you know? So yeah, we're going to take a look at another one of his poems today, one we have not looked at so far, but I did want to just kind of touch base again with I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, since, yeah, it seemed to be one that people struggled a little bit more than I thought they would with as you went through it on Common Lit. But again, the day that I had you looking at that, I had you looking at it primarily for personification purposes, and it does have plenty of that, talking about the dancing in it, talking about their heads, talking about the loneliness of the cloud, all of that stuff, all right? But turn back a page to page 506. Composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3rd, 1802. All right, so here's the first thing to consider. There's a date given for when this poem was written. If you were to look in history, you would find that September 3rd, 1802 is not any significant date, okay? In history, in British history, it's not a day that is one that everybody should have been chilling on a bridge, all right? So, the fact that that's the title of this poem lets me know that this is a piece that is very much focused on self and autobiography. It's not a date that's important for any sort of global reason. It's not a date that's important for any sort of historical reason. It's not a date that was significant. It's not a date that's significant for any reason other than just the author was having an experience and he just felt like he had to write about it. And so he creates this poem, and now, all these years later, here we are looking at it, and we are sharing in this moment. But yeah, the date itself is not significant other than the fact that this moment felt very important to Wordsworth. So, this is an autobiographical poem. This is really based on an experience he had on September 3rd, 1802, when he was standing on Westminster Bridge, and he just got really super inspired. So, self and autobiography. It's a sonnet, so it's only got 14 lines. Go ahead and read that right now, just to yourself, and then we'll go on from there. a lot of use of first person in this poem.